The plasma bolt missed Commander Maria Santos by inches as she dove behind the training barricade. 23 alien cadets from across the galaxy watched in stunned silence as their human instructor rolled to her feet, not even breathing hard. The Zephyrian who had fired the shot stood frozen, his four eyes wide with disbelief. "Cadet Vexthor, your aim needs work," Maria said calmly, brushing dust from her uniform. The combat simulation chamber hummed with energy barriers and holographic obstacles designed to push military academy students to their limits. Today's exercise was supposed to be routine weapons training, but something had gone wrong with the safety protocols. The assembled cadets represented 15 different species from the Galactic Coalition: towering Krillians with their chitinous armor, graceful Altarians with their silver skin, and dozens of others who had come to the Central Military Academy to learn from the best. They had all heard stories about humans joining the Coalition 5 years ago, but few had seen one in action. "Instructor Santos," called out Cadet Yalneth, a reptilian Sauron whose scales shimmered green with concern. "The training weapons appear to be malfunctioning." "That was a live plasma charge." Maria nodded, her dark eyes scanning the chamber's control systems. The holographic displays showed multiple system failures cascading through the training facility. Emergency lights began flashing red as automated voices announced containment breaches in several sectors. "All cadets remain in position," Maria ordered, her voice cutting through the rising panic. She moved to the central console, her fingers dancing across the alien interfaces with practiced ease. The technology was Altarian design, modified with Krillian defensive systems, and powered by Zephyrian energy cores. Most species needed years to master even one alien technology. A new alarm began wailing as the chamber's doors sealed shut. The air recycling system stuttered, and several cadets began showing signs of distress. The Aquarian students, who breathed through gill slits, were particularly affected by the changing atmosphere composition. "Ma'am, we're trapped," reported Cadet Brixtall, a young void walker whose transparent skin revealed the luminous organs beneath. His species was known for their calm demeanor, but even he couldn't hide his growing anxiety. Maria's hands moved faster across the controls, bypassing security locks that should have been impossible for a human to understand. The Coalition's technology was built on principles that human science was still catching up to, yet she navigated the systems like she had designed them herself. The Krillian cadet, Thekmal, clicked his mandibles in agitation. "Instructor, perhaps we should attempt to breach the door manually. My species possesses sufficient strength to—" "Negative," Maria interrupted, not looking up from her work. "The doors are sealed by emergency protocol. Breaking them would flood this chamber with toxic gases from the breached sectors." Another plasma discharge sparked from a malfunctioning training weapon, forcing the cadets to scatter. The shot struck the wall where Cadet Linera had been standing, melting through reinforced metal like it was paper. The young Sylvan's bark-like skin had turned pale with fear. "How many combat simulations have you participated in, Instructor Santos?" asked Cadet Zorek, a massive titan whose stone-like features rarely showed emotion. His people were known for their directness, and he had been questioning human capabilities since the start of the semester. "Simulations?" Maria laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both cheerful and slightly terrifying. "Cadet, humans don't train in simulations for the kind of combat we face." The lights flickered again, and this time they stayed dim. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie blue glow. The temperature began to drop as life support systems struggled to compensate for the multiple failures. Several cadets were now clustering together, their different species' natural instincts kicking in. The pack-minded Lupians moved as a group, while the individualistic Christarch students spread out to maximize their chances if the situation deteriorated further. "There," Maria announced, finally stepping back from the console. "I've isolated the primary failure cascade. The system should stabilize in approximately 60 seconds. "Should?" repeated Cadet Velvtash, her Asterian antenna-like appendages quivering with nervous energy. Her species was known for their precision in language, and the uncertainty bothered her. Maria turned to face the assembled cadets, and for the first time since the emergency began, they saw something that made them all fall silent. She was smiling, but It wasn't the reassuring expression of a concerned instructor. It was the smile of someone who had seen real danger and found it almost refreshing. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice taking on a different quality. "Gone," was the patient tone of their weapons instructor, replaced by something harder, more experienced. "What we're experiencing right now is a minor technical malfunction. I've seen human children play games more dangerous than this." The chamber shuddered as something exploded in the distance. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see smoke rising from other sections of the academy. What had started as a simple training malfunction was spreading throughout the facility. "Instructor," Cadet Nixola spoke up, his cybernetic implants flickering as he tried to establish communication with the outside. "I'm detecting similar failures across multiple buildings. This appears to be a coordinated attack on the Academy's infrastructure." Maria nodded, grimly. She had suspected as much when she noticed the pattern of the failures. Someone had deliberately triggered a cascade that would disable the Academy's defenses, while trapping students and instructors in sealed chambers throughout the complex. The cadets looked at each other with growing alarm. They were the best and brightest from their respective worlds, destined to become officers in the Coalition fleet. But right now, they were trapped students facing their first real crisis, and their human instructor was the only thing standing between them and disaster. As if to emphasize the point, another plasma discharge lit up the chamber, this one much closer than the others. Part 2. The explosion that followed threw half the cadets to the ground. Maria moved like liquid lightning, pulling Cadet Jex Rin away from falling debris before the young mineral-born could react. Her speed was impossible by Coalition standards, yet here she was, seeming to anticipate danger before it materialized. "Stay low and move toward the center of the room," Maria commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. The cadets obeyed instinctively, their training taking over despite their fear. She noticed how they naturally looked to her for guidance, even though some of their species were supposedly superior to humans in every measurable way. Cadet Ptolemek, whose people the Netherians possessed natural psychic abilities, suddenly stiffened. His black eyes went wide as his mental senses detected something approaching. "Instructor, I sense hostile intent, multiple entities moving through the facility." "How many?" Maria asked, already moving to secure the backup weapon locker that most of the cadets didn't even know existed. "Difficult to determine. Their minds are shielded somehow, but the malice is overwhelming." Ptolemek clutched his head as if the psychic feedback was painful. Maria's expression hardened. She had encountered psychic shields before, and they usually meant one thing: professional soldiers trained to resist mental attacks. This wasn't random sabotage. It was a military operation. The weapon locker opened under her touch, revealing an arsenal that made several cadets step back nervously. Coalition regulations strictly limited weapons access on Academy grounds, but Maria had always believed in being prepared. She selected a human-designed assault rifle, its primitive chemical propulsion system looking crude next to the elegant energy weapons the cadets were familiar with. "Instructor," Cadet Pexisandra asked, her melodious songbird voice trembling slightly. "Shouldn't we wait for the security forces to handle this situation?" Maria checked the rifle's ammunition counter and frowned. "Cadet, the security forces are dealing with simultaneous breaches across 17 different buildings. Response teams are spread thin, and we're low priority until we can prove we're facing immediate danger." As if summoned by her words, an explosion rocked the corridor outside their chamber. The reinforced walls held, but cracks appeared in the transparent aluminum viewing panels. Whatever was happening out there was getting closer. "Besides," Maria continued, slinging the rifle across her back and selecting several smaller weapons, "I've found that waiting for rescue usually means waiting too long." She distributed compact plasma pistols to the older cadets, those who had already passed their advanced weapons certification. The younger students received emergency beacons and basic protective gear. Throughout the process, her movements remained calm and efficient, as if she had done this countless times before. Cadet Mordine, a proud warrior caste Draconian, ruffled his scaled wings in agitation. "With respect, instructor, my people have been fighting for 10,000 years. Perhaps I should take point when we move." Maria paused in her preparations and looked at him directly. Her brown eyes held something that made the dragon-like alien take an involuntary step backward. "Cadet, how many real combat operations have you participated in?" "I have completed all required combat simulations with honors, and my family lineage includes warriors who served in the Coalition's founding wars," Mordain replied, his chest swelling with pride. "That's not what I asked." Maria's voice remained level, but there was steel underneath. "Have you ever been shot at by someone who actually wanted to kill you?" The chamber fell silent except for the distant sounds of combat echoing through the facility. Mordain's wings drooped slightly as he shook his head. None of the cadets had seen real combat. They were students, albeit exceptional ones. "Then you follow my lead," Maria said simply. She moved to the damaged door controls, examining the twisted metal-infused circuits. The blast doors were designed to withstand direct hits from ship-grade weapons, but the explosion had warped the frame enough to create a small gap. "I can widen that opening," offered Cadet Kyle Seth, flexing arms that could easily bend steel bars. His forge-born physiology gave him strength that rivaled industrial machinery. "Too loud," Maria replied, pulling out a small device that looked like a modified cutting torch. "We need stealth, not brute force." As she worked on the door, the cadets had their first opportunity to really observe their instructor under pressure. Every movement was precise and purposeful, with no wasted motion or hesitation. Her awareness seemed to extend beyond normal human senses, as she occasionally paused to listen for sounds none of them could detect. Cadet Wixola, whose sensor breed people were known for their acute perception, found herself straining to match Maria's apparent sensory input. "Instructor, what do you hear?" "Boots. Standard Coalition issue, but modified for stealth operations. 3 pairs moving in formation down the main corridor." Maria didn't look up from her cutting work. "They'll reach the intersection outside this room in approximately 90 seconds. "How can you possibly know that?" demanded Cadet Renthos, his logical, computed mind rejecting information that seemed to have no basis in sensor data. Maria finally looked up and her smile returned. This time, it was definitely not reassuring. "'Cause, Cadet, I've been on the other side of operations like this more times than I care to count." The cutting tool finished its work, creating an opening just large enough for them to slip through one at a time. Maria peered through the gap, her eyes adjusting to the darker corridor beyond. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh red shadows, and the acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air. "Single file," she whispered. "Stay close, stay quiet, and do exactly what I say when I say it." She slipped through the opening first, moving with a fluid grace that seemed to defy physics. The cadets followed, trying to match her silence but failing miserably. Their different physiologies and species-specific movement patterns made stealth difficult, despite their best efforts. The corridor stretched in both directions, lined with doors leading to other training chambers and administrative offices. Most showed signs of damage from explosions or energy weapon fire. Bodies of Academy security personnel lay scattered at irregular intervals, their Coalition uniforms scorched and torn. Cadet Yelnara, a young healer-class empathic, began to approach one of the fallen guards, but Maria's hand shot out to stop her. "Don't," she whispered. "They're gone, and we can't help them now. But I might be able to." "No." Maria's voice carried absolute finality. "The first rule of survival is never stop moving unless you're safe." "We're not safe." As if to prove her point, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the direction Maria had predicted. She motioned for the cadets to press against the wall and remain motionless. 23 beings from across the galaxy held their breath as 3 figures in tactical armor rounded the corner. The intruders wore modified Coalition uniforms with identifying markings removed. Their movements were professional and coordinated, but Maria noticed immediately that their formation was wrong for Coalition training. These soldiers had been taught by someone else, using different tactical doctrines. Part 3. The lead intruder stopped directly in front of their hiding spot and raised his weapon. Maria could see his finger tightening on the trigger as he began to turn toward them. In that split second, she made a decision that would change everything the cadets thought they knew about humans. She moved. The first attacker went down without firing a shot. His neck twisted at an impossible angle before he could even register Maria's presence. The second managed to squeeze off one wild energy blast that scorched the ceiling before Maria's rifle but connected with his skull. The third soldier had time to look surprised before a thrown combat knife found its mark in his throat. The entire engagement lasted less than 3 seconds. Maria retrieved her knife and quickly searched the bodies. While the cadets stood frozen in shock, she found communication devices, tactical maps of the academy, and weapons that definitely weren't standard Coalition issue. Instructor, Cadet Dexmira finally managed to whisper, her crystalline lattice-form body actually resonating with vibrations of disbelief. "You just killed 3 armed soldiers with your bare hands." "Actually, I used a rifle and a knife too," Maria replied matter-of-factly, examining the tactical map. "And they weren't Coalition soldiers." She pointed to insignia that had been hastily removed from the uniforms, leaving telltale marks in the fabric. "These are Separatist forces, the independence movement that's been causing problems in the outer systems." "But how did you move so fast?" demanded Cadet Sixander, his computational mind still trying to process what he had witnessed. Human physiology shouldn't allow for that level of speed and precision. Maria looked up from the map, and for the first time since the emergency began, she seemed to really see the cadets as individuals rather than just students to protect. They were looking at her with a mixture of awe, fear, and desperate curiosity. "You want to know how?" she asked quietly. "Then pay attention, because this might be the most important lesson you ever receive." She rolled up her left sleeve, revealing her forearm for the first time since any of them had known her. What they saw there made every single cadet fall completely silent. Burned into her skin was a mark that none of them recognized, but all of them instinctively feared. It looked like a combination of a skull and crossed weapons, surrounded by symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. The tissue around it was scarred in patterns that suggested repeatedly healed combat wounds. "This is an Earthborn combat mark," Maria said, her voice taking on a tone none of them had ever heard before. "It's earned by surviving situations that would kill most trained soldiers from any species in the Coalition. Cadet Nox Terith, whose people the Void touched were known for their ability to see beyond normal reality, actually stumbled backward. Instructor, that mark, it's not just scarred tissue. There's something else in there." "Very good, Cadet. Your perception training is paying off." Maria rolled her sleeve back down, covering the mark but not erasing its impact. "Earth doesn't just train soldiers. We forge weapons." The implications of her words hit the cadets like a physical blow. They had all heard rumors about Earth's military capabilities, but the official Coalition reports described humans as enthusiastic but ultimately limited warriors. Brave, certainly, but lacking the advanced physiologies and technologies that made other species truly formidable. "The mark contains nanotechnology," Maria continued, leading them deeper into the facility while explaining. "Stored knowledge, reflex enhancement, tactical analysis programs, and battlefield medical systems. It's integrated so deeply with human nervous systems that removing it would cause permanent brain damage." They paused at another intersection, and Maria held up her hand for silence. After a moment, she motioned them to continue down a corridor that looked more damaged than the others. Blast marks scored the walls, and the smell of ozone indicated recent energy weapon fire. "How many humans carry these marks?" asked Cadet Polaris, her natural curiosity-driven nature overcoming her fear. "That information is classified above your clearance level," Maria replied. "But I will say that Earth takes the protection of Coalition space very seriously." They reached what appeared to be a maintenance shaft, and Maria began removing the access panel. Her movements were completely silent, despite working with tools on metal surfaces. The cadets watched in fascination, as she seemed to know exactly which bolts to remove and how to lift the heavy cover without making any noise. "Inside," she whispered, gesturing to the shaft. "This connects to the main power distribution center. If the Separatists want to cripple the Academy permanently, that's where they'll plant their charges." One by one, the cadets crawled into the maintenance shaft. The space was barely large enough for the smaller species, and some of the larger cadets had to contort themselves painfully to fit. Maria brought up the rear, replacing the access panel behind them with practiced ease. The shaft was dark, except for the dim glow of emergency power conduits running along the walls. The air was hot and filled with the smell of electrical components and recycled atmosphere. For most species, crawling through such a confined space would be disorienting and claustrophobic. Maria moved through it like she had been born there. "Instructor," Cadet Bixagrando whispered from ahead. "I can hear voices coming from the power center." "How many?" Maria asked, already knowing the answer would complicate their situation. "At least 6, possibly more. And I think I hear machinery sounds? Like they're installing something large." Maria's jaw tightened. If the Separatists were installing permanent equipment in the power center, this wasn't just an attack. It was an occupation. They intended to hold the academy and use it as a strategic base in coalition space. "Change of plans," she announced quietly. "We're not going to observe and report. We're going to stop them." "Ma'am," Cadet Voxerin protested, "we're students, not soldiers. Shouldn't we find another way out and call for reinforcements?" Maria's laugh was soft but somehow terrifying in the confined space. "Cadet, reinforcements are pinned down across the entire system. 3 Separatist fleets jumped in system just as this attack began. The coalition forces are fighting for their lives in space, while ground teams hit strategic targets on every inhabited planet." The full scope of the situation began to dawn on the cadets. This wasn't an isolated incident at their academy. It was a coordinated military operation designed to cripple coalition defenses across multiple systems. "So we're on our own," said Cadet Kexmiro, his warrior poet nature finding a certain beauty in their desperate situation. "No," Maria corrected, and her voice carried a certainty that made them all believe her. "You have me." Part 4. The maintenance shaft opened into a service alcove directly above the main power distribution center. Through a ventilation grate, they could see the massive chamber below filled with energy conduits, control systems, and enough power to run a small city. 7 Separatist soldiers were working with military precision to install what looked like a massive bomb. "Fusion device," Maria whispered, recognizing the distinctive configuration. "Big enough to take out half the academy and irradiate the rest for decades." The cadets pressed together behind her, trying to get a view of what they were facing. The enemy soldiers moved with professional efficiency, 2 standing guard while 5 worked on the device installation. Their equipment was top-tier military hardware, not the improvised weapons of typical terrorists. "Instructor," Cadet Lexandra breathed. "Those are coalition energy rifles they're carrying. How did Separatists get access to our weapons?" Maria's expression darkened as she studied the soldiers below. "Because some of them are coalition soldiers, defectors who joined the Separatist cause." The implications hit the cadets like a cold wave. They had been taught that the coalition was united, that their military forces were bound by oaths of loyalty that transcended species differences. The idea that trained coalition soldiers could turn against their own was almost incomprehensible. "Why would they betray everything they swore to protect?" asked Cadet Nixalar, whose honor-bound culture made such treachery physically painful to contemplate. "Because they believe in something more than the coalition," Maria replied grimly. "They think the galaxy would be better off without central authority, with each species governing only its own territory." One of the soldiers below looked up toward their hiding spot, and Maria immediately pulled back, motioning for absolute silence. They waited in the cramped alcove as footsteps approached their position, hearts pounding with the realization that discovery would mean certain death. The footsteps paused directly below them, and they could hear muffled conversation in a language that combined coalition common tongue with what sounded like draconian military codes. After what felt like eternity, the sounds moved away. Maria waited another 60 seconds before looking down again. The fusion device was nearly installed, its ominous bulk connected to the Academy's main power grid by dozens of thick cables. Part 2, 7 minutes remaining. "Can you disarm it?" whispered Cadet Rexus Island, whose technical aptitude had made him top of his engineering classes. "Not from here," Maria replied, studying the device's configuration. "I'd need direct access to the primary control interface, and that means getting past all 7 guards." The cadets looked at each other with growing desperation. Even with their instructor's mysterious combat abilities, 7 trained soldiers with military weapons seemed like impossible odds. "There might be another way," said Cadet X Mara, her strategic thinking making her naturally suited to tactical problems. "If we could create a distraction elsewhere in the facility, draw some of them away." "No good," Maria interrupted. "Bomb disposal protocol requires minimum manning levels. They'll leave 3 people with the device no matter what happens outside." She continued studying the chamber layout, her enhanced tactical systems analyzing sight lines, cover positions, and attack vectors. The Combat Mark's integrated technology was processing hundreds of scenarios per second, but none of them offered acceptable success probabilities with untrained cadets. "Instructor," Cadet Wexmere spoke up. "What if we don't fight them at all?" Maria looked at him with interest. The young philosopher-class rational was known for finding solutions that others missed. Explain your thinking, Cadet. The fusion device needs the Academy's power grid to arm properly. If we shut down the main power feed, the device becomes inert. But the power control systems aren't in this chamber. They're in the auxiliary room 3 levels down. Maria's eyes lit up as she saw the potential. Cut the power, disable the bomb, and let Academy security handle the confused Separatists when backup power fails. Exactly. And the auxiliary power room should be less heavily guarded, because it's not as obviously critical to their operation. It was a solid plan, but it had one major flaw. Someone would need to stay behind to guide the cadets through the facility, while someone else went alone to the power controls. And if the Separatists figured out what was happening, the person at the power controls would be facing trained soldiers with no backup. "I'll take the power room," Maria decided. "Rexylan, you know the facility layout well enough to guide the others to a safe extraction point." "Ma'am, you can't handle 7 soldiers by yourself," protested Cadet Dexazira, her protective class instincts making her want to shield others from danger, even at cost to herself. Maria's smile returned, and this time it carried something that made the cadet's blood run cold. "Cadet, you're still thinking of me as your instructor. That's only part of what I am." She began removing equipment from hidden compartments in her uniform that none of them had noticed before. Grenades designed to disable electronic systems appeared from her belt, along with compact weapons that looked nothing like standard coalition designs. "The Combat Mark doesn't just enhance human capabilities," she explained as she checked each weapon's status. "It unlocks them. Every human who earns this mark becomes something more than human soldiers become human weapons." The cadets watched in fascination as she transformed before their eyes. Gone was the patient teacher who had guided them through months of training. In her place was something predatory and precise. A warrior whose very presence changed the air in the cramped alcove. "You have 15 minutes to reach the auxiliary power room," she continued, programming a timer into one of her devices. "At exactly 15 minutes, cut the main power feed. The fusion device will begin cycling down, and I'll use the confusion to engage the remaining guards." "What if something goes wrong?" asked Cadet Pixandra, her natural pessimism making her consider all the ways the plan could fail. "Then you complete the mission without me," Maria replied simply. "The Academy, the cadets, the coalition, all of it is more important than any individual." She handed Rex's Island a small communication device. "Emergency channel. If you run into trouble you can't handle, activate this and follow the instructions you receive." "Who will respond?" he asked, examining the unfamiliar technology. Maria's expression became unreadable. "Other people with combat marks." The implication hung in the air like a promise of violence. The cadets were beginning to realize that their human instructor was part of something much larger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Earth's contribution to coalition security wasn't just enthusiasm and courage, it was systematic preparation for the kind of warfare that other species preferred to pretend didn't exist. "Move out," Maria ordered, her voice now carrying absolute command authority. 15 minutes. On my mark." She checked her weapon one final time and looked down at the Separatist soldiers with something approaching anticipation. Mark. Part 5. The cadets moved through the maintenance shafts with new urgency, Rexylan leading the way through passages that connected the Academy's buildings like a hidden circulatory system. Behind them, they could hear Maria beginning to position herself for whatever she planned to do when the power failed. "Left here," Rexylan whispered. consulting the facility schematics he had memorized during orientation. The auxiliary power room was located in the Academy's oldest section, where the original builders had placed critical systems as far underground as possible for protection. Cadet 6 Mira, whose naturally flexible physiology made her the best at navigating tight spaces, scouted ahead through a particularly narrow section. Her whispered report sent chills through the group. 2 guards outside the power room door, Coalition uniforms, but they're carrying Separatist identification codes. More defectors. Can we go around them? Asked Cadet Texalolar, his species' natural preference for avoiding conflict making him search for alternatives. Negative, Rex Island replied after checking the schematics. That's the only access point to the power room that doesn't require going through 3 different security checkpoints. They were running out of time. 11 minutes until Maria expected the power to fail, and they still needed to get past trained soldiers who would shoot first and ask questions later. I have an idea, said Cadet Dixonell, whose deception-specialized training made her naturally suited to misdirection. My people can alter our vocal patterns to mimic other species. If I can sound like a coalition officer calling for backup, it was risky, but it was the only plan they had. Dixonell moved to the ventilation grate closest to the guards and began speaking in perfect coalition officer dialect, claiming that Separatist forces had breached the upper levels and needed immediate reinforcement. One of the guards bought the deception completely, running toward the emergency elevators. The other hesitated, his training making him suspicious of orders that didn't follow proper communication protocols. Command! This is Guardian Post 7 requesting confirmation of emergency assistance order. He spoke into his communication device. Rex Island realized they had seconds before the guard received a response that would expose their deception. Without thinking, he dropped through the ventilation grate behind the remaining guard, landing silently despite his substantial weight. The guard spun around at the sound, but Rex Island was already moving. His technical training had included basic self-defense, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of trying to overpower a trained soldier. They grappled desperately, the guard reaching for his weapon while Rex Island tried to prevent him from calling for backup. Other cadets began dropping from the shaft to help, but their movements were clumsy and uncoordinated. None of them had real combat experience, and it showed in every awkward motion and hesitant decision. The guard broke free and raised his weapon, finger tightening on the trigger. In that moment, Rex Island saw his own death approaching and realized he was about to fail everyone who depended on him. The energy blast never came. Instead, the guard crumpled as Cadet Noxbeth struck him with a maintenance tool she had grabbed from the shaft. Her peaceful nature people avoided violence at all costs, making her action even more shocking. Is he dead? Whispered Cadet Gexiara, whose medical training made her immediately check the fallen soldier's vital signs. Unconscious, she reported with relief. But we need to restrain him before he wakes up. They used cable from the maintenance supplies to secure the guard, then quickly accessed the power room. The chamber was filled with massive energy distribution systems that controlled power flow throughout the Academy. Rex Island moved to the main control console, his technical knowledge finally becoming useful. 7 minutes remaining, announced Cadet Luxodandra, who was monitoring the timer Maria had given them. How long to shut down the main power feed? 2 minutes if everything goes perfectly, Rex Island replied, his hands dancing across the alien interface systems. 4 minutes if I have to bypass security protocols. The power distribution network was more complex than he had expected, with multiple redundant systems and automatic failsafes designed to prevent exactly what they were trying to do. Coalition engineers had built the Academy's power grid to survive direct military attack, which made it frustratingly difficult to shut down from within. Warning, announced an automated system voice. Unauthorized access detected at Power Distribution Node 7. Security forces have been notified. How long before they arrive? Asked Cadet Vexamir, moving to watch the corridor outside. Unknown, Rex Island replied grimly. But probably not long enough. He continued working, sweat beading on his forehead as he tried to balance speed with accuracy. One wrong command could lock out the entire system, or worse, cause a feedback loop that might damage critical Academy systems. 5 minutes, Alexandra called out. Through the ceiling above them, they could hear the first sounds of Maria's attack beginning. Explosions echoed through the facility as her electromagnetic pulse grenades disabled electronic systems in the main power center. The sounds of energy weapon fire followed, along with shouts of confusion and alarm from the Separatist soldiers. "She's actually doing it," breathed Cadet Wixelin, whose enhanced hearing let her follow the battle above. Fighting 7 trained soldiers at once. The weapon fire intensified, then suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was somehow more terrifying than the sounds of combat had been. "Did she win?" asked Cadet Poxhiler, afraid to hope. Before anyone could answer, the lights throughout the academy flickered and went out. Rex Island had successfully cut the main power feed, plunging the entire facility into emergency lighting. "Power's down," he announced unnecessarily. The fusion device should be cycling into safe mode, but their celebration was cut short by the sound of running footsteps in the corridor outside. Multiple guards were converging on their position, drawn by the security alert and the sudden power failure. "We need to move," urged Cadet Kixindra, her survival instincts screaming warnings about their exposed position. "Where?" demanded Rexus Island. "We've completed our mission, but we're trapped in a dead-end chamber with armed soldiers approaching." That's when they remembered Maria's communication device. Rex's Island activated it, hoping whoever responded would be able to help them escape their desperate situation. The response was immediate and shocking. "Omega Team, this is Alpha Prime. Congratulations on successfully completing your first live fire operation. Extraction is en route." The voice was human, but it carried an authority that made Maria's command presence seem gentle by comparison. More importantly, it meant there were other humans with combat marks operating in the area. "Extraction?" repeated Cadet Dex Sizzla, her confused mind trying to process what she was hearing. "First operation? What exactly is happening here?" Part 6. The answer came in the form of an explosion that blew out the exterior wall of the power room. Through the smoking breach came a figure in black tactical armor that moved like liquid shadow made solid. The newcomer's face was hidden behind a helmet, but the combat mark visible on her neck was identical to Maria's. "Alpha Prime, Omega Team secured," the figure announced in a voice that brooked no argument. "Initiating extraction protocol." The cadets stared in stunned disbelief as more armored figures appeared through the breach, moving with the same inhuman precision and speed they had witnessed in Maria. Each one bore the distinctive combat mark, and each one moved like death incarnate. "Wait," protested Cadet Rex's Island, his logical mind finally putting together pieces that didn't make sense. "You called this our first operation, but we're students, not soldiers." The lead figure removed her helmet, revealing a woman who looked barely older than Maria, but whose eyes held depths that spoke of battles across multiple star systems. When she smiled, it was with the same predatory confidence they had seen in their instructor. "Cadet Pilot Program," she explained simply. "Selected students from multiple species, placed under human instruction, then evaluated under real combat conditions." The implications hit them like a physical blow. Everything they thought they knew about their academy experience had been a lie. They weren't just students learning military theory. They were test subjects, being shaped into something else entirely. "The attack?" asked Cadet Dixonell, her deception-trained mind recognizing the signs of elaborate manipulation. "Real enough," Alpha Prime replied. "Separatist forces actually did assault the academy with intent to destroy it, but we've been monitoring their communications for months, and we knew the attack was coming." She gestured toward the breach in the wall, where more human operators were setting up defensive positions. "This gave us the perfect opportunity to test whether our training methods could produce effective multi-species combat teams under stress." The cadets looked at each other with growing horror and fascination. They had been manipulated from the moment they arrived at the academy, guided through experiences designed to transform them into weapons. But the worst part was that it had worked. "Maria?" asked Cadet Lexandra, suddenly afraid for their instructor. "Instructor Santos is secure," Alpha Prime replied. "She successfully neutralized 7 enemy combatants and disabled their fusion device. Her mission parameters included ensuring your team's survival while evaluating your performance under combat stress." Through the communication device, they could hear Maria's voice. "Omega Team report status. All members functional and combat effective. Alpha Prime responded. Recommend immediate advancement to Phase 2 training. Phase 2? Rex Island's voice cracked slightly. What exactly is Phase 2? Alpha Prime's smile widened, and they realized they were looking at something that had once been a normal person before the combat mark transformed them into a living weapon. Phase 2 is when you learn what humans really do in this galaxy. The sounds of combat were fading throughout the Academy as human operators systematically neutralized remaining Separatist forces. The efficiency was terrifying. Each engagement lasted only seconds, and the enemy soldiers seemed to simply disappear rather than fight back. "How many of you are there?" whispered Cadet Nixler, her honor-bound nature struggling to process the deception they had been living within. "Enough," Alpha Prime replied cryptically. "Humans joined the Coalition 5 years ago, but we've been preparing for that moment for decades. Every human who volunteers for military service undergoes evaluation for combat mark eligibility." She moved to the power room's main display, where tactical information was flowing across screens faster than most species could process. Her eyes tracked the data streams effortlessly, absorbing information that would overload typical organic brains. "The Coalition faces threats that conventional military doctrine cannot handle," she continued. "Enemies who use psychological warfare, species-specific biological weapons, and tactics designed to exploit the cultural weaknesses of unified military forces." The cadets were beginning to understand that they had been inducted into something far larger than a simple military training program. They were part of humanity's long-term strategy for survival in a galaxy full of potential enemies. "What happens to us now?" asked Cadet Texoler, his natural fear making him voice what they all were wondering. "That depends on your performance evaluation," Alpha Prime replied, reviewing data that appeared on her helmet's internal displays. "Some of you exceeded expectations and will advance to specialized training. Others showed potential but need additional development." She paused at Cadet Rex's Island's file, and her expression became thoughtful. "Your technical abilities combined with tactical thinking under pressure make you an excellent candidate for engineering combat operations." Moving on to Cadet Noxbeth, her smile returned. "Non-violent species who can overcome cultural programming to engage in necessary combat are extremely valuable. Your psychological profile suggests leadership potential." One by one, she reviewed each cadet's performance with an eye toward how they could be developed into more effective weapons. It was both flattering and terrifying to realize that their every action had been monitored and analyzed. "And if we refuse?" asked Cadet Dixonel, her rebellious nature asserting itself despite the circumstances. Alpha Prime's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around them. "The Academy attack was real, Cadet. Separatist forces intended to kill every student and instructor in this facility. Without human intervention, you would all be dead right now." The truth of her words sank in slowly. They were alive because humans had protected them, trained them, and ultimately saved them. But that protection came with a price. The galaxy is more dangerous than Coalition public information suggests, Alpha Prime continued. "There are species that view the Coalition as a convenient target, others that want to break it apart for their own benefit, and some that simply enjoy causing suffering." Through the breach in the wall, they could see the night sky illuminated by the lights of human extraction vehicles. The operation was winding down with military precision that left no trace of the advanced technology or tactics that had been employed. "Humans offer protection," Alpha Prime said finally. "But protection requires preparation, and preparation requires people willing to do things that others cannot or will not do." Maria's voice came through the communications system again. "Alpha Prime, area secured. Academy administration has been briefed on cover story. Official reports will show that enhanced security protocols repelled the Separatist attack with minimal casualties." "Understood." Omega Team extraction in 5 minutes. The cadets found themselves at a crossroads that would define the rest of their lives. They could return to normal academy training, knowing what they now knew but unable to speak of it. Or they could step forward into a world of secrets and shadows, where they would become something more than their species had ever intended. Part 7. The extraction vehicles were unlike anything in standard Coalition inventories. They moved with impossible silence and seemed to blend with their surroundings in ways that suggested technology far beyond what humans were supposed to possess. As the cadets boarded them, They realized they were seeing proof that Earth's contribution to coalition security went far deeper than anyone suspected. Maria joined them for the flight back to their dormitories, but she looked different now. The patient instructor persona had been permanently replaced by something harder and more dangerous. When she looked at them, they saw recognition soldiers acknowledging other soldiers. "Questions?" she asked simply. The cadets had hundreds of questions, but Cadet Rex's island voiced the most important one. "How long have humans been planning this?" "Since before we made first contact with the Coalition," Maria replied. "Earth's governments realized that joining a galactic civilization would expose us to threats we couldn't imagine. So we began preparing for worst-case scenarios." She gestured toward the tactical displays visible in the extraction vehicle's cockpit, where human operators were monitoring activities across multiple star systems simultaneously. Every human colony ship that left Earth carried military specialists trained in combat mark operations. Every trade mission included intelligence gatherers. Every cultural exchange involved evaluating potential allies and enemies. "You've been spying on everyone," said Cadet Dixonell, her accusatory tone reflecting her sense of betrayal. "We've been surviving," Maria corrected firmly. "Do you know what happened to the last 3 species that joined the Coalition before us?" None of the cadets did, and their silence was answer enough. The Kelnar were absorbed by the Draconian Empire after Coalition forces proved unable to defend their home system. The Yithrak were wiped out by a biological weapon that targeted their specific genetic markers. The Nendari still exist, but only as a client species serving masters who enslaved them during a manufactured resource crisis. The implications were staggering. The Coalition's public face of peaceful cooperation and mutual defense masked a much more dangerous reality where new species were vulnerable to exploitation or elimination. "Humans studied these failures," Maria continued, "and we realized that joining the Coalition would paint a target on our backs. So we made sure we were ready when someone inevitably tried to eliminate us." Through the vehicle's transparent aluminum windows, they could see the Academy growing smaller below them. Emergency vehicles were arriving to deal with the official version of events, while human operators melted away into the night like they had never existed at all. "The Separatist attack," said Cadet Luxagandra slowly. "Was that really about independence movements? Or was someone testing Coalition defenses?" Maria's smile held no warmth. "Both. The Separatists believe they're fighting for ideological freedom, but their weapons, their intelligence, their tactics, all of it came from species that want to see the Coalition weakened or destroyed." Alpha Prime's voice came through the communication system. "Omega Team, you now have knowledge that makes you permanent security risks. Standard procedure requires either recruitment or elimination." The casual mention of elimination sent chills through the cadets. But they were beginning to understand that this was the reality of the galaxy they lived in. Knowledge was dangerous, and dangerous knowledge required dangerous people to manage it. "However," Alpha Prime continued, "your performance suggests that recruitment would be more beneficial to Coalition security than elimination. You have 72 hours to decide whether you want to continue standard Academy training with enhanced monitoring or advance to Phase 2 operations." "What exactly is Phase 2? Asked Cadet Nox's Beth, though part of her already suspected the answer. "You become human weapons," Maria replied simply. "Not biologically, but functionally. You learn to think like humans, fight like humans, and if necessary die like humans." She rolled up her sleeve again, showing them the combat mark that had started this entire revelation. The mark doesn't just enhance capabilities. It changes how you see the galaxy. You stop thinking about survival and start thinking about victory. "And if we choose standard Academy training?" asked Cadet Texolar. "You graduate, receive assignments in Coalition forces, and serve with distinction," Maria replied. "But you'll always know that there are threats out there that your training can't prepare you for. And someday, when those threats become active, you'll wish you had made a different choice." The extraction vehicle landed at a facility that wasn't on any Academy maps. Through the windows, they could see other mixed-species teams engaging in training exercises that bore no resemblance to standard Coalition military doctrine. These beings moved with the same predatory confidence they had seen in Maria and Alpha Prime. 37% of Academy graduates who witness combat mark operations choose Phase 2 training, Maria said, watching their reactions. Of those, 86% successfully complete the program and receive their own marks. What happens to the other 14%? Asked Cadet Dixonell. Though she feared the answer. They die learning to become something more than their species intended, Maria replied honestly. The combat mark doesn't just enhance existing capabilities. It forces evolution at the cellular level, and not everyone survives the process. The cadets sat in silence as the magnitude of their choice became clear. They could return to safety and normalcy knowing that beings like Maria stood between them and threats they couldn't imagine. Or they could step forward into danger and transformation, becoming part of humanity's secret war for galactic survival. I need to know, said Rex Island finally. How many species in the Coalition know about this? None, Alpha Prime replied through the communication system. Human combat mark operations are classified at levels that exceed most planetary government clearances. As far as the Coalition knows, humans are enthusiastic warriors with primitive but effective technology. We're the secret that keeps the Coalition functioning, Maria added. While other species debate policy and negotiate treaties, we eliminate threats before they become crises. The vehicle came to a complete stop, and the boarding ramp began to lower. Outside, they could see facilities that would train them to become living weapons. Decide quickly, Maria advised. The galaxy doesn't wait for anyone to be ready. One by one, the cadets looked at each other, seeing in their companions the same mixture of fear and determination they felt themselves. They had survived their first taste of the real galaxy, and they had learned that survival required becoming something more than they had ever imagined possible. Cadet Rex's Island stood first, his technical mind already analyzing how combat mark technology might integrate with his species' natural abilities, how it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. Cadet Nox Beth joined him, her peaceful nature now tempered with understanding of when violence became necessary. My people need protectors who understand sacrifice. One by one, the others made their choices. Some chose safety and normalcy, accepting monitoring and memory modification that would let them live ordinary lives, but most chose transformation, driven by the knowledge that the galaxy was more dangerous than they had ever suspected. As they walked toward the training facility, Maria's final words followed them. Welcome to the real Coalition. Try not to die on your first day. Behind them, the Academy sat peaceful under stars that hid threats beyond imagination, protected by beings who had chosen to become more than human to keep it safe.